Okay, so now let's look at a cone. So here we're trying to figure out the surface area of this right cone. And again, I just want to mention, I mentioned it at the very beginning, but I want to mention it again. When we use the term right cone or right pyramid, it just means that the tip, the point, is straight directly above the center of the base. So if you connect the tip, as you can see in this picture, to the center of the base, it forms a right angle. It's perfect right above it. Okay, so surface area of a cone, remember that's going to be pi times the radius squared. That part's going to tell us that base part. And then it's plus pi times the radius times the lateral height. And so the lateral height, just like with a pyramid, you have height and lateral height with cones. The height goes from the center of the base up to the tip. The lateral height goes that diagonal size. And again, I explain that a little bit more in that other video that I'll post for you guys. But again, in this case, we don't have that. So before we can do anything with this problem, we need to solve for that lateral height. But we can do that the same way we did before, because you can see that that forms the height, the lateral height, and in this case, the radius, form a right triangle. So we can use a right triangle and use Pythagorean theorem. So we have 8 squared plus 6 squared equals, that's c squared. In this case, that's our lateral height. 8 squared is 64, 6 squared is 36, 64 plus 36 is 100, and so the lateral height squared is 100, which means that the lateral height itself has to be 10. So now that we know the lateral height is 10 meters, we can just go ahead and plug numbers into the formula. So we have pi times the radius, which is 6, squared, plus pi times the radius, which is 6, times the lateral height, which is 10. So 6 squared is 36. 6 times 10 is 60. So we have 36 pi plus, oops, sorry, I'm not meaning to click here. 36 pi plus 60 pi, which, again, we talked about this in the last section. You can add these together just like you would if it was a 36x and a 60x. So that's going to give you 96 pi. Okay, and so you can leave the answer like this. It's going to be, you're talking meters, so it's going to be meters squared, which gives you B for an answer. Okay, you could also type it into your calculator, and if you type in 96 times pi into your calculator, or if you were to type it into your calculator at this step right here, you end up with 301.6 meters squared. Okay, so now we just have, those are the kind of two main types of problems that we'll have in this section. So now we've just got some extra practice of those. Again, if you want to jump in and try doing the examples, the homework on your own now with the examples that we've done so far, or if you want to stick with me for a couple extra together practice, either way is fine, just as long as it's all making sense to you. All right, so now we've got a cone. Again, we're trying to find the surface area, but in order to find the surface area, it's pi times the radius squared plus pi times the radius times the lateral height, which is that slanted length right there. So we're going to have to use our Pythagorean theorem here. So 20 squared plus 15 squared is going to give us our lateral height squared. So you may recognize that Pythagorean triple there. If not, that's okay. If you have, you already know the answer. But this is 625. And the square root of that is 25. So if you recognize that this is just 5 times 4, this is 5 times 3, you recognize that 3, 4, you'd recognize that this one has to be 5 times 5, because that's that 3, 4, 5 Pythagorean triple. Again, if you don't recognize the Pythagorean triples, it's not bad, it just means that you have to go through and work it out. But if you recognize those special Pythagorean triples, those special ones, then you save yourself a little bit of time because you just know right away. All right, so we have pi times the radius, which is 15, squared plus sorry, don't know why it sometimes does that on here. I think it's just the way I lay my hand touches the screen occasionally, so sorry about that. So pi times the radius times that lateral height. All right, now again, if you're going to type it as a decimal, if you're going to write your answer as a decimal, that's fine. You can just type it into your answer, pi times 15 squared, write that decimal down. Pi times 15 times 25, write that decimal down, add them together. Otherwise, you can just take 15 squared, which is 225. So here you have 225 pi. And then 15 times 25 is going to give you 375 pi. And then 225 plus 375, 25 plus 75 is 100. 200 plus 300 is 500 plus that extra 100, so that's 600 pi. So you can choose to write your answer. We're talking, our units was yards, so surface area is going to be yards squared. So your answer can be written as erase this part here so you can see what I had typed. So two ways you could write your answer. Either you can write it as 600 pi yards squared, or if you would have typed that in, it ends up being approximately 1,885 yards squared. Okay, both forms of writing the answer are acceptable. All right, one more practice problem, I think. Now I don't remember off the top of my head how many examples I had on here, but all right, so again, I'll draw this out in case you like that. Picture's not fabulous, but it's there. So we have 4 triangles that we have to find the area of, as well as the one square. So the one square, I'll just write that down here right off the bat. That's going to be 11 times 11. That's how we're going to find the area of the square. Now, if we're looking at a triangle, we need to find the base of the triangle. So it's going to be half of the base of the triangle, which is 11, times, remember the height of this triangle is actually the lateral height of this pyramid. Let's see if I can draw that in there decently enough. And so to find that lateral height, we have to look at this right triangle that was formed here. And so I'm just going to draw that right triangle over here so you know what to focus, or so you can see what we're focusing on. So that's 12. This is going to be half of the whole length across that, so that's going to be 5.5. So to find that lateral height there, we're going to have to use the Pythagorean theorem again. So 12 squared plus 5.5 squared equals that lateral height squared. you get 174.25 equals your L squared. So then when you square root that to find your L, you get about 13.2. So that's your lateral height here. Oh, sorry guys. 13.2. All right, so one triangle is 0.5 times, or a half. 0.5 is the same thing as a half. So a half times 11 times 13.2. One triangle is 72.6. And so we're going to take that 11 times 11 that we had over here and add to it 4 triangles that are each 72.6. So we type that into our calculator and you should get 411.4. All right, and there's your homework. Let me know if you guys have any questions.